How do we find time to pray? It can be hard to fit into your schedule, and I'm going to be real. Creating a habit of consistent prayer hasn't been easy for me. It seems like just when I get a regular prayer routine, something will change and I'll have to start from scratch to rebuild prayer into my new schedule. I've found some things that work for me when I'm in that habit building stage, and I'm throwing them out there in case they help. Let me know in the comments how you've made your prayer times into a habit, or tell us what hasn't worked for you. We can all learn from each other in the comments. I'm also going to talk about the stages of life that are overwhelming when it feels like you need prayer the most, but have the least amount of time to actually do it. So stick around for my thoughts on the seasons of life that are challenging. Now, when my routine changes, I'm much more dependent on my calendar because I don't want to forget anything. After a job change or a new child comes into the family, setting aside time to just pray may seem selfish or impractical, but this habit won't become a part of your new routine if you don't make time for it intentionally. Whether you use a calendar, a planner, or a daily to-do list, you can add prayer to that list. And this way, you won't inadvertently fill up all of your time. Think of it as an appointment and put it at a time that doesn't typically conflict with other commitments. Like if you leave for work at 8:30 in the morning, schedule your prayer time from 8 to 8:30 and plan your morning so that you're completely ready by 8, but then stay and have your prayer time. If mornings are hectic, plan some time after dinner or right before bed. This might mean planning ahead to watch one less show or listen to one less podcast episode. Our evening activities often become habits themselves, so adding in a new habit will take intentional planning or it'll never happen. Choosing your location may be just as important as choosing the time of day. If sitting in your home where you can see the chores that need to be done is distracting, you may need to choose a location where you can fully enter into prayer. If you enjoy walks, use those walks as your prayer time. Or you can also sit in the park or your backyard or even a room in the house that doesn't represent chores like a guest room or a study. Choosing a location is about intentionality. If you're building a habit, you want to remove the obstacles, in this case, the distractions associated with the rooms in your home. For some of you, the more familiar the room, the more you can relax and worship. Consider what motivates you. Be honest about what you need in order to settle into prayer and worship, and then plan around those needs. If you're having trouble getting this habit going, getting the routine of a daily prayer time going, link it to another habit. There are habits in our lives that we quickly adjust when our circumstances change. Our morning routine, lunch, dinner, bedtime. Attach it to one of the habits that you're already doing. Plan ahead when you eat lunch to allow for a 15-minute prayer time at the end. Or go to bed a little bit earlier, but spend some time doing the Ignatian Examen right before you get into bed. You get the idea. Pretty soon your prayer time will become a habit of its own, and you can be a little more flexible with the timing. Now, you may notice that these ideas are more about creating habits than they are about focusing on the importance of prayer in your life. And you're right. Working on the habit creation has been much better for me than thinking guilty thoughts about how prayer should be more important to me than social media. Shame is a terrible motivator. So if it feels like you're planning it like all the other chores, you are. And once it becomes a habit, then you can rest in the spiritual devotion that you're desiring. Someone out there is thinking, Melissa, I barely have time to eat lunch, let alone add prayer to the end of it. When I get home, I'm exhausted. I try to pray, but I fall asleep after I start. I know some of you are in challenging situations that make these ideas out of reach. Some of you are working 2 jobs, or you have young children, or you're caring for a family member that has a medical condition, or you have a medical condition that makes life so unpredictable that consistency is impossible. I see you, but more importantly, God sees you. When our prayer life is inconsistent or missing altogether, sometimes we feel a sense of guilt, like we're letting God down. And if I communicate anything in this video, I want you to know that God isn't disappointed or angry at you for not having a consistent prayer life. God sees you and your challenges. Now, as I give these ideas, I don't want to add a sense of obligation. Prayer and worship is a way for you to connect to God. It helps you to grow. It helps you to know God's heart towards you and others. Don't think of your prayer life as something God is demanding of you, but rather something God wants for you in your spiritual growth. Attaching guilt to prayer will make it harder to do. Changing how you think of it might remove some anxiety, but it won't change the fact that some of you have a very demanding schedule and end up exhausted at the end of the day. If you're experiencing this, but you still want to create a habit of prayer in your life, I would suggest a few things as you try to get that habit going. First, start small. Make it a weekly appointment instead of a daily one. If you attend a church on Sunday, make that appointment on Thursday at whatever time of day works best for you. Make it a 10-minute appointment where you leave all of your devices and distractions in another room, unless, of course, you're listening to music or reading a devotion on your phone, but then put it in Do Not Disturb mode and really give that 10 minutes to whatever form of prayer or worship you've decided to do. Second, merge it with another part of your routine. Earlier, I talked about linking prayer to another part of your routine, like after lunch or before you get ready for bed. But if your schedule is already full, it might be easier to start building the habit by praying while you shower or while you drive. Listen to worshipful music while you eat lunch. If you feel like you really need a regular prayer time, this may not seem like enough, but it will build in a time where you connect with God regularly. The consistency will create the habit, and then you can try to find ways to increase that habit. Third, blunt honesty. There are a lot of ways to structure a prayer time, but if your life is under pressure, it's probably best to get straight to the point. Use your prayer time to talk honestly about what you're going through. I recommend blunt honesty in prayer in every stage of life, but especially when life is difficult. God might be the only one in your life where you can be completely honest about how you feel about the difficult parts about your situation. God sees you and knows what you're dealing with. You can tell God that you feel stuck or overwhelmed or sad, and God won't respond with impractical advice. Your side of the prayer can be all the honest things for that day, but I would encourage you to not stop there. Include some time at the end where you're silent and listening or noticing what comes to mind, what you hear from God. You may not hear anything specific, but I would encourage you to build some silence into your practice where you're just in the presence of God. It's not about receiving an answer as much as it's about making space for this kind of silent awareness of God's presence in your life. And as you have more time, you can add in other methods, but I would suggest that you always include some silence as well. Now, if I leave you with one thought, it's that God doesn't want this from you as much as God wants this for you. And let me leave you with this blessing. May the peace of Christ be with you.